Hi everybody, and thanks for joining our webinar today. My name is Tom Rao and I'm the Sales Operations Manager at SalesPad. The webinar today is going to focus on our data collection product and taking control of your warehouse with that. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to type them in the question box that you can see, and we'll stick around afterwards to answer those. We're going to start off by going into a few things about how to set up your warehouse before you buy a software for warehouse management. What things do you need to think of, how to set up your warehouse, those sort of things. We're also going to talk about what to consider before even going into the buying process. So what's your budget? What are your key requirements? Those types of things. We're going to go more into data collection, talking about some of the key features, some of the hardware requirements, and at the very end we're going to go into a demo of it at a very high level. If you need a deep dive demo after this, feel free to reach out to your sales rep or email sales@salespad.net. So first off, again, I want to talk about some key warehouse considerations. So things that you need to think about before going even into the purchasing decision of buying a warehouse management solution. So you have to define, what do you want your layout to be? How is your warehouse going to look? Is that already set up, or is that something you have to consider and that's going to change when you buy something for scanning outside in your warehouse? So some of those considerations are, what's your layout? Do you have bins? Do you do aisles, shelves, zones? How are you going to set that up? What makes sense for your business? In Dynamics GP, you can do a multi-bin environment, so you have multiple bins inside of a warehouse facility, or you don't have to do that. It just depends on what makes sense for you. Are you going to set these up alphanumeric? How are you actually going to name all of them? Are we going to have aisle A, aisle B, aisle C? Are we going to also label our shelves? And then even inside of that, what are we going to label our bins? It's always easiest if you have a schema, like a A100, B100, C100. It makes it easy for you to know exactly where something is inside of the warehouse. Also spacing. Think about things like, are you going to have forklifts driving around, or are you going to have people walking? That has some considerations to think about in terms of how far apart you're going to space everything. Kind of similar to spacing is your station location. So think of that as our area for receiving, our area for shipping, for picking, for QA, all those types of things, and how are we going to put them in relation to one another. A lot of times you're going to want to set it up so you receive your products into one area, then that goes into QA checks, and that goes into a put away area. On the fulfillment side, we're going to pick it, we're going to pack it, we're going to ship it, and where are you putting all those things so it makes sense in your process flow, so someone's not having to walk from picking it across the warehouse to going and then packing it somewhere. You also have to determine, I kind of mentioned this, are you walking or are you riding? We have several customers that have forklift type machines out there that they're actually driving around because they have a big facility. If you have 4 people in a 200,000 square foot warehouse, it's going to be pretty tedious to have to walk from one corner to another every time you want to pick something. Not necessarily involved with your warehouse or just general inventory options. So how do you want to set up your inventory? What types of unit of measures? Do you sell by the each or the case, or do you sell by a pallet or a box? And that does have some considerations to think about when talking about how you put that on your shelves. Are there individual pieces? Are they in boxes? Do we want barcode for a box and a barcode for an individual piece? So those are things to think about. Are we serial or lot tracking our items? Are we placing our lots in a way that makes sense by expiration date or other sort of attributes? And then lastly, how are you grouping? So where do you want to put certain SKUs? Do you have certain product lines that need to go together? So that way, if you're looking for something in a specific product class, you know exactly where to walk in the warehouse so that it makes sense. Another thing to think of is whether you want to start using scanners or computers. For someone that's totally new into using a warehouse management software, maybe having a scanner in the beginning isn't something you want to do. Maybe you just want to use the computer to print out forms and then walk around. Now, obviously, you wouldn't look at something like data collection for that, but that might be a nice first step to jumping into it and then eventually getting to the scanners. Connectivity is a big thing. This is something I tell any customer that ever comes to us looking for warehouse management. You're only going to be as successful as your connectivity in the warehouse. If you only have one router inside the warehouse and it's in the very far corner and you have to walk a couple hundred yards away, chances are connectivity is not going to be that good. So you're going to want to set up multiple access points, make sure that all times you're able to get a consistent Wi-Fi connection with the scanner. And lastly, do you have any needs for automation? That's something to think about. Do you want to have robotic pickers? Do you have any reasons to do automated processes for shipping or for packing or anything like that? And how is that going to relate to the software? Does the software have anything to do with that? So just something to think about for most small and medium-sized companies. Automation isn't really key. You probably have people out there actually doing all these steps. But again, if that's something that's an important thing for you, you need to look at the software and see if it can do those sort of things. Going in a little bit further, just general things to consider when choosing a WMS. Now obviously before you're find a company or seek somebody out to buy software, you have to think about truly what are your needs. And you need to prioritize those. So figure out what's the top of our list. Is it really important that we use scanners for fulfillment? Are we looking at more for receiving? Why are we buying this? Is it to keep better track of our inventory? What's the key reason for doing that? On top of that is determining your budget. There are many different platforms out there and they all come with a different cost. You can go from $5,000 to $500,000 and you need to make sure you're looking at the right tool and know your budget going into it so you don't see a bunch of demos and get sold on a product and realize that it's way out of your budget and you shouldn't have been looking at that in the first place. A big thing too is just considering your staff. Think about their aptitude for learning something like this. Are you going to throw something really complicated at them and go from never doing scanning to doing scanning and your people just don't accept it? In that case, a lot of times it never works out. If your users don't accept the software that you're using or it's too difficult for them, the project's not going to be successful. Also, another really big thing, and we always tell our customers, have a captain on your side. You'll have a consultant on our side when you buy our software that's going to train you and guide you and help you configure everything, but you need to have a resource or resources that are dedicated towards this project and making sure that it's a success, keeping track of timelines, keeping track of goals being hit and all those sort of things. Plan your approach too. Do you want to do everything all at once? Do you want to do fulfillment, receiving, transfers, anything you can think of, stock counts? Or do you want to do a phased approach? Whereas let's just start with picking and see how that works. Let's get successful at one thing and then we'll go into receiving to use the scanners in that sense. I also always recommend do a pilot phase. Pick your best warehouse person, the person you know that knows your processes the best, whether that's a warehouse manager, and have them try it out first. Implement it, have them test it, run through all sorts of things, rather than giving it to everybody all at once and then having certain users not have success with it and sort of the project fails in that sense. So that internal captain is a really, really key piece in choosing a WMS and eventually implementing it. Consider the support of the company you go with. That's a big thing. So after you go live, what sort of resources do you have to help you as you make process changes or as you have an issue? Face it, software is going to have issues at some point. There's a chance that something could happen and you're going to need to lean on a support team. So those are things to think of. How big are the support staff? What are their hours? Do they match up with our business? Those types of things. And another key thing to say yes or no to internally is customization an option. Every business that comes to us typically has some sort of unique process. A lot of times the software fits that, but occasionally you're going to get somebody that has an off-the-wall process that they just aren't willing to change. So if you go into a company looking for a software and maybe it fits 90% of the functionality that you need, but there's that 10% that it doesn't, are you willing to have that developed as customization? Also, how scalable is the product? Again, if you're easing into it, you want to start off small, but how does that grow with us? Does it have additional features that we can turn on? Those are things to think about. And lastly, have an evaluation plan already in place before you buy the software. So what are we going to use to determine if this was successful? If we hit all of our goals, all those sorts of things, you want to have that in place to know, you don't want to just base everything off of one bad week or one good week. You want to say, what were our goals going into this? What were our timelines and did we hit them? Now going into data collection more, so a little bit of data collection 101 to learn a bit more about the product. So first off, data collection is obviously a warehouse management solution and it has a live integration to Dynamics GP. By that I mean there's no syncing, it truly is hitting the Dynamics GP database in real time. So as you're fulfilling, as you're receiving, that's all hitting GP right away, so everything is in sync. It's not anything like a separate database that syncs over a time period. It's truly all real time. There's a few different components with data collection. There is a mobile component, which is the scanners like you can see on the screen. There's the client or the desktop portion, which would be used on a computer. That's also where a lot of things are configured at. And then there's the web service, which is how these two talk to each other. For the client, as far as how you would use it, there is a mobile server, so that's what your mobile devices are connecting to, which actually tells them to run or not. There's a lot of lookup functionality, so for somebody that wants to be able to go in on the computer and look up, how much do we have of this particular item, where is it throughout our warehouse, or maybe where is it in other warehouses that we have. There's a lot of lookup functionality, but there's also a lot of security and settings in there. So if you want to set up how the mobile device is configured, what screens this particular user has available. That's what the client is really used for. And we'll look at that and also the mobile device. And then general printing capabilities. So if you want to print off your bin labels or your item labels, that's where you can access the client side and go in there and figure out what you want to print and actually do that. The mobile usage, a little more straightforward. That's just mainly used for the scanning. So actually walking around and doing your scans for whatever process that may be, picking, receiving, transfers, stock counts. That's what you're going to use the scanner for. There's two options, and we're actually going to go into both of those because there's some key differences. But SalesPad DataCollection supports both Windows Mobile and iOS devices. Windows Mobile are kind of the industry standard, and then iOS is up and coming, and there's some different devices that we support that I'll talk about. Lastly is we have an extended warehouse module. So going back to talking about scalability, we have an additional module that you can purchase that turns on a bunch of functionality that you might not need if you're a smaller company, you don't have really complicated processes, but you have the option to add that on, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the demo. So hardware, we always get a lot of questions around hardware. We are actually not a hardware reseller, but we have plenty of even customers that do it. We have other companies we source it to. It just depends on what you're looking for, but we can easily connect you with hardware. So a couple of things. I'm actually going to bring up some devices and show you as we go along. As I mentioned, we support Windows Mobile, we support iOS, and then there's also some things to think about when choosing printers. So the first one I want to pull up is actually a Windows Mobile device. Again, these are sort of your industry standard. This is an MC75 Motorola device. There's also other devices we support, Intermec devices, Honeywell devices. You can actually find them on our system requirements document on our website. This is pretty straightforward though. Some of them have a big handle like the image you can see on the screen, but this one allows you to kind of have a little handheld. They're very rugged. You can drop them. They can go in cold environments a lot of times. So very, very rugged, but also with that comes some cost. These range anywhere from $1,000 if you find a used one on eBay, all the way up to $2,500 to $3,000 if you're buying a brand new one, the latest edition model. Some benefits and drawbacks. Again, highly rugged. In a warehouse setting, that's usually good to have. If you drop it, you don't want to break this. It costs $2,500. For the Windows Mobile versus the iOS, there is quite a bit less support. Windows Mobile is stopping support for these actually in a few years, meaning you're not going to have support included. You could still buy them. They'll still work. They're just not going to continue a lot of development on them. So that is something to think about. They'll still be around. I'm sure there'll still be separate companies that would support them for you, but just something to consider. Again, the higher cost is a big thing. Some other drawbacks would be a little bit of complexities with connectivity. These are basically like a mini computer. They connect to Wi-Fi, but it's not like a phone where you turn on Wi-Fi and it connects automatically. There's some configuration that needs to be done. The signal is not always as good as something like an iPhone or an iPad. So again, another thing to consider. The next one I want to go into is actually an iOS device. So what I have here is actually an iOS device that has an iPod Touch inside of it. This is a Honeywell Captuvo SL22 series. So we support the SL22, the SL42, and SL62. That's for the iPod, iPhone, and iPad. All of them work just fine. These cost considerably less, and they're a lot less rugged. So cost-wise, you're looking at about $300 to $700 for the sled. It just depends on what you get. Some of these have built-in credit card swipers, which you obviously don't need, so that'll lower the cost a bit. Then the actual device, I mean, any iPod, iPad, or iPhone, you're going to look at $150 to $700 or $500, depending on the model you get. If you get the Pro versions, those sort of things. Again, you can find the supported devices that we have on our system requirements document. I'll actually be demoing this one today. They have built-in scanners inside of them. The biggest thing with these is they're not as rugged, but with a cost that's sometimes about a third, you could break a few of them and equal the cost of a Windows Mobile device. Other things to think about is it's iOS. They're not going to stop development for this. Apple is a huge powerhouse, so the devices that this supports or sleds that it goes into, you're going to continually get more and more accessories to go with those and more features with this. So this is something that's a long-term solution. It tends to be something more and more of our customers are going to. And going back to connectivity, obviously these connect to Wi-Fi very, very easily. They have strong signals. It's only as strong as what you set up in your warehouse, but it's just very easy to connect these, put in your Wi-Fi password, and that's pretty much it. And lastly, I want to talk about printers. So there's quite a few. We get a lot of questions on printers that we support, And quite honestly, we don't have a preference on printers. Pretty much anything that's going to work with your computer is going to work with SalesPad. So a lot of the printing is actually done out of the client side, so it's going to be running on a laptop or a desktop. So really any Zebra printer that is fairly new is going to work just fine. And these can run anywhere from $100 to well over $1,000, depending if you're getting a little small, maybe a Bluetooth one, or you're getting a large one that can print out a ton of labels at a time. Those can get expensive. One that I'm showing actually right now is a Zebra model that works with our Windows mobile version of DataCollection, where you can actually trigger from the mobile device to print on this. And on the back of it, it actually has a little clip, so someone could clip it onto their belt. So if they're walking around the warehouse and maybe they see a damaged item label or a bin label, they can just quickly go into the mobile device, click print, it's going to print out here, and they could rip it off. So there's a few different options. It just depends on what you want. But again, Zebra printers, those are always good. There's plenty of other brands for item label printing that we don't really mind. Whatever you use, it tends to work. Obviously, you're going to want to test it to make sure. And again, some of the hardware companies that we work with, they'll sometimes give you free trials of these to let you try them out to make sure they work and they print everything that you want. So those are some of the major considerations on hardware. Now going into more of the data collection features. So we're going to cover most of these. The demo is going to be pretty high level. For the sake of time, we're not going to go into every single screen. So I want to point out the general functionality that it has. So you're going to get label printing like we talked about, picking or fulfillment, receiving off of a purchase order. We have some packing functionality with the scanner, so after you pick it, maybe you want to pack it in individual boxes and naming those boxes and what's in those. There's some confirmation scanning, which you're actually going to see that from me once I pick it. I'm going to confirm it again as another layer. You can also do confirmation of a receipt to make sure you received in all the correct things. There's some detailed warehouse configuration. This goes with the extended warehouse module that we offer. I'm going to show a few of those things, but type of functionality that includes would be like setting up your warehouse so that certain bins aren't pickable, or that I could only receive to this specific bin, or maybe I need a minimum quantity available in a certain bin, or I can't exceed a certain quantity. So it's being able to set up additional detail. A lot of smaller companies don't need that, but it's an option, again, to scale as you grow and as you have more complex requirements, it is there. There's also stock and cycle counting. I would say most customers that have data collection are doing that. It uses the stock count schedule functionality in GP and allows you to count it. It also allows you from the mobile device to create a new stock count schedule on the fly and just start scanning away. So that's a really good way to make sure your inventory is always accurate, whether you're doing that, a weekly count, a monthly count, or quarterly count, whatever it may be. There's also functions for doing just general adjustments. Maybe you find a damaged product and you want to adjust it out, or you find something sitting behind a shelf and it doesn't look like you had that in stock. You want to add that to your stock. There's lookup capabilities from both the mobile and the client. That's obviously a big thing in a big warehouse. You don't want to have to walk to the back to figure out what you have in a bin. It's easy just to go to a computer or look it up through your mobile device to say, hey, where are these? So I can walk to it and get it. We also have site and bin transfers, so doing a site-to-site transfer or doing a bin-to-bin transfer. One thing that's really important to point out, a lot of the transactions that we're doing, they're not actually posting in GP. So they're creating a transaction or a receipt. So for example, when you receive a PO, it just creates the receipt in GP, which you have to then post. That's a good level of security in case somebody receives something wrong on accident. You always have that additional level of posting. There are products out there that will do auto posting. So as soon as you receive it and that creates that receipt number, it posts it in GP. We're just queuing up the transactions. The only exception to that is a bin transfer. That is something that automatically reflects in your inventory. And it makes sense to do that because if you're standing by one bin and you want to transfer it to another bin, you don't want to have to do it and then walk to a computer to post it. You want that immediate. So that's why that one hits immediately. There's also returns functionality. So basically like receiving in a return. And then there are some manufacturing tools. We're continuing to build a product out and there's going to be more and more functions on the manufacturing side of things. But some of the transactions that it supports now are the issue and reverse issue, and there's the scrap and reverse scrap. So those are some of the features. Again, we'll look at them as we go into the actual demo of data collection. So some of the key benefits. I want to go into those to talk about, why would you go with something like data collection versus another product? The big thing is the live integration to GP. That's a huge thing. There are other products out there that maintain a separate database and they sync. The problem with that is you don't always have accurate inventory in that sense. If it's syncing every 10 minutes, a lot of transactions can occur in that 10 minutes. So truly live updating, so someone that's in the sales field, If they're looking up an order, they can immediately see that it was fulfilled or that it automatically did a batch move. So everything is in sync. Also, other SalesPad products, it integrates with pretty much all of our SalesPad products, so they're talking together. If you're not familiar with our other SalesPad products, I would definitely contact your sales rep to discuss those. You'll actually see SalesPad Desktop, which is our core product today. I'm going to show how that works in tandem with data collection. Another thing is, scalable. So the product is very scalable. You can start off very small and doing a very simple one, and that's even in terms of price. You can get into it very low cost point in terms of how we average out against our competitors. But then you can also grow in functionality. We have that extended warehouse module that turns on all the different functions, so it scales with you as you continue to grow. The two mobile platforms are huge. Obviously Windows Mobile has been around, everybody's very familiar, but there's sort of a push going to iOS, so having support for both of those gives you the options. Another thing is the user-based security. I've seen warehouse management systems out there that do what they do. You're not able to configure it to turn it off, certain features that users don't need access to, so you could have picking people accidentally during receiving things. With data collection, you can set it up so each person can only see what they're supposed to see. When I log in, I only see picking if that's my only responsibility. It's very easy to use as well. Going back to user adoption, if your users don't adopt it, chances are you're not going to use it. So data collection is very, very simple to use. It's not that complex in terms of what the user actually has to do. Most of the complexities are on the back end and setting it up, which is something that we help you with. SalesPad support is a huge thing. Now, I mentioned this in the beginning of something to keep an eye out for. We have a great support team located right in our headquarters here that can help you with any issues that come up or help you with general questions or guiding you in the right direction after you've gone live. SalesPad Custom, again, we have a very large group of people that just do custom work. So if you come to us, maybe we're missing a certain feature that you really, really need, or you want something to work a little bit differently, that's something we can always evaluate as a custom project. So that's a huge thing. Some companies don't actually do that. That's something we really specialize in to make sure that you get a tailored solution. Lastly, I've mentioned it before, is that extended warehouse module. It's an additional purchase, so you buy an additional module. So that means if you don't need it, you don't have to pay for it. But if you need those features, you can buy it and it turns on that additional functionality. At this point, we're actually going to transition into a demo of the software. So first off, we're actually going to look at the client side of data collection. So to explain the client a little bit more, again, this is what's going to be running on a desktop out in the warehouse. Typically for our customers, we usually see 1 or 2 of these per warehouse location that you have. It's a concurrent user license. And again, what this is typically used for is maybe a warehouse manager to log in, or people that want to log in and look up inventory or print bin labels or something like that. But it has a lot more functionality above and beyond that. So this is where you're going to configure what's actually on the mobile device, how the mobile device works. This is where the server is on that side. You can't buy data collection without the client. So you absolutely have to have at least one of them. And again, if you have 5 warehouses, chances are you're going to have at least 5 licenses to have one of these in each location. So first off, we're not going to cover everything inside of the client here. I just want to touch on a few key features and then we'll transition into the mobile side. The first thing that you're actually going to see is the data collection server. So this is what's actually communicating with the mobile device. Most of the time you're going to install this, so anytime the computer is running or the server is running that this is attached to, this is going to be running so the mobile devices that can connect. At any time, if you need to shut down operations or you don't want the mobile devices to work, you simply just stop the service and nobody can get access at that point. Additionally, I want to talk about some of the lookup capabilities. So think again about your warehouse. If you want to just know in general maybe how many items I have in a certain area or where is this located out throughout my warehouse without having to walk around and look for it, or maybe I even want to figure out, hey, what's my north warehouse have in stock? I don't have any of these, I need to get some, they need to do a transfer to me. So we can do general inventory lookups from here. If you can see here, I'm filtered down to an HD40, which is a 40 gigabyte hard drive, an inventory item in my system. From there, I can actually see each location that I have. I can see on-hand quantities, I can see availability, I can see if it has any safety stock set up, if it's allocated to sales orders, and if it's on a purchase order, anything like that I have complete visibility into. At the very bottom, there's a number of different areas. I can see any sales fulfillments, any allocations, but I can also even see the bin level. So if I want to talk about figuring out what bins is this in, how many are in each bin, I can easily look that up and see that. Even going in further, maybe I don't want to look up an item, I want to look up a specific bin without having to walk to the back of the warehouse where that's located. I could look up that bin, look up that warehouse. In this case, I'm looking up the A100, and I can see everything that's in it. Now, in my demo environment, I have a lot of things in my bins, but you're going to be able to see how many do I have. Maybe I need to move some product to stock it up. You can see that easily from the console or the client. Also, being able to print labels is a huge thing. So most of the time, your labels, you're going to print those all at the very beginning of an implementation, label all your products if they don't already come in with labels on them. But you can do ad hoc label printing if you want to. You just go in here and you search for an item number, you print it right from there. SalesPad's data collection has a built-in report designer, so you can build labels to really look whatever you want. If you want the logos on there, if you want a certain barcode symbology, if you want a certain font size, you can build those all on your own, or we build them for you as part of an implementation, and you can change them at any time. On top of label printing, you can actually do what we call smart printing, and this is a really powerful feature. So what I have mine set up to do is anytime I pack something, so I use a scanner to actually pack it, it automatically prints a packing slip when I'm all done packing that document. You can do other things like automatically printing item labels when you receive in a PO. So without actually having to go over to this and do something, based upon a command that you set up, it can print out for you. Going into some of the conversations about the extended warehouse module. So this warehouse configuration is a really powerful tool, and this is where we get into some of the more higher end warehouse systems where you want to set up certain restrictions, be able to manage your warehouse more detailed. In this particular scenario, I have a bunch of warehouse locations, and I also have multiple bins inside of them. So if I scroll up, you can see I can see my A100 bin. What I can do with this is I can set up even more detail. Do I want to have this bin be pickable? Do I want to be able to receive items into that? In this particular case, you can see that I don't have this selected as a pickable bin. So if somebody tries to pick from that bin with a scanner, it won't let them. It won't let them do that. If I try to receive to it, put stuff inside of it, it won't let me do that either. So that just allows you to set it up so that users couldn't possibly make a mistake out on the floor. They're going to put things in the right places, and if they try to put it in the wrong place, it's going to tell them that they can't do that. Another thing is the mobile layout manager. So we know that not everybody has the same layout or the same setup as far as what they want the mobile device to look like in terms of how the fields are displayed. So what's really nice is you can set up different layouts with this to figure out, what fields do you or what screens do you want to display, in which order do you want the fields inside of those screens to display, what's visible, even what is the screen called when you log in. So the layout manager is a really nice piece in that sense. One of the last things I want to touch on the client side is the picking audit. So as people pick things throughout the day, you could filter on various fields. So I want to look at maybe today's date. I want to look at a certain user that's picking things. You can very easily go into that and see what's been picked throughout the day. You can see the item number, the quantity that they picked, the time that they picked it. You can see the order that it's associated with, so you can track that and go back to that at any point in time. Some other things that I don't have open but I do want to discuss is we do give you the functionality to do a bulk pick ticket and a put away report. So if you want the system to help you figure out where to put something or where to pick something from, for example, I want to print out a pick ticket of these 10 orders, but I want to pick them in a way that makes sense. So going back to if you have your warehouse set up in an alphanumeric fashion, we could print out a bulk pick ticket that would take these 10 sales documents and order them so that you're walking throughout the warehouse in the correct way. So you're not going from one corner to another corner. So that helps in that sense. And then on the same side, the put away report. So as I receive things, maybe I want to put a big group of items away at the same time. I'm going to have it be able to print out in an order that makes a lot of sense, and you could have that print out with a barcode so you could just scan the actual sheet too. The last thing I want to go into just to display the additional use for the client is some settings. So again, this is where most everything that's being done from the mobile side is configured. So as you go into here, if you want to have certain things like once I'm done picking a document, which queue does it go into? So in my case, it goes into it pulls from the picking queue. Once I'm done, it goes into the shipping queue. Part of SalesPad's workflow on the desktop side, if you're familiar with that, is you can set up these workflows to have a lot of automation happen in the background, but data collection can actually forward it as you complete a task, and we're going to look at that. So at this point, I'm actually going to transition over into the mobile software, giving a high-level overview of that, but I also want to show how SalesPad and data collection can work together to automatically move a document throughout the system. Okay, now you should be able to see the mobile device up on the screen. Again, make a call out to the question box right now. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in there. Again, I'm going to stick around at the end and I'll answer anything that I can. If you have additional questions, maybe after this that you think about, feel free to email sales@salespad.net or get in touch with your sales rep. So the mobile device on my screen right now, again, I'm using the Honeywell Captuvo SL22 for an iPod Touch, and actually just using a mirror service that puts it onto my laptop. So this is what it would look like on the iOS side. As you can recall from a previous slide, Windows Mobile looks a little bit different. There's more graphics where you have pictures on them. So just a general overview of this, all the screens are pretty much going to look the same. And again, based on security role, you can figure out what a user actually has access to. So just to go into some of the screens, opening up the picking, basically it gives you a spot for document number, item number, description, from bin, all those sorts of things. And as you scan, they're going to obviously be pre-filled in. With the client, you can actually determine which order these fields come up in. So if you want to scan the document number, then the item number, and then the bin, or maybe your process is a little bit different, obviously it has to work in a proper flow, but you can set that up so it makes sense. So all the screens, again, are going to look pretty similar as you go into these. So to touch on a few of them, picking is obviously fulfillment. We can do PO receiving. You can also do receiving just against a vendor without a PO. Packing functionality. So again, once you pick it, maybe you want to pack it into individual boxes. So you open that, it gives you options for choosing a package number or a package type. Maybe you have some predefined types. We're actually working on an integration between this and our shipping product, so the packages will flow together. Other things you have are confirmation screens. Again, these are additional layer of functionality of once I receive a product, I want another step to actually go through and confirm it again. And you can even set it up so that you're only allowed to scan those. User can't type in anything, so they can't mess it up. They can't look up what was supposed to be on the order. They truly have to scan what's in front of them for the device to confirm it. And the device will tell you this wasn't on that order, or you have too many quantity, and it'll tell you that it's incorrect. You also have site transfer and bin transfer functionality, pretty straightforward there. If you're moving it from one warehouse location to another, or if you're just moving it internally in a warehouse from bin to bin, you can do both of those. Stock counts, this is a key thing that most companies are looking for, just to be able to keep inventory counts going, make sure your inventory is always accurate. This utilizes the stock count schedules in GP, so you can create those from GP and then just go through and use a scanner and scan your products as much as you want. And then what happens is once you're all done, you submit it. Anything that was different from your stock count schedule or what's supposed to be in your inventory, it's going to write that back to GP automatically. So if you were supposed to have 10 widgets and you scanned 9 of them, it's going to write back that variance of 1 automatically to GP. You can actually, again, create those on the fly from SalesPad too. So let's say you're out in the warehouse. I don't want to go over to GP. I just want to count this shelf right now. I'm going to create that schedule real quick, and then I'm going to go through and scan it automatically. Other things you can do are, again, returns, inventory adjustments. If you find damaged product laying around, or if you find something hiding behind a shelf, at any time you can just go in here, do a quick adjustment. You can log notes as far as I found this behind a shelf, or this was broken, whatever you want to do. And then lastly is inventory lookup. So this is, again, a nice feature. If you're standing somewhere, maybe I'm on one end of the warehouse, I want to know where this particular item is without having to walk around or having to walk back to a computer to do it. I can quickly go into here, and I'm actually just going to scan a barcode. And what it's going to do is it's going to do a lookup and figure out pretty much where that's at. I could look at specific bins on where it is, or I could even see things like what's my quantity on hand, what's my quantity allocated, quantity available. And if there's a lot of a particular item, which in my case there's well over 100,000 of one particular item, it'll search for a little bit. You'll see things like how many documents is this on, how many do we have on hand, how many are allocated, how many are available. And I could even drill into the bin level and see exactly how many I have in each bin throughout my warehouse that I'm filtered on. So now what I want to do is actually open up our SalesPad Desktop product and show you how SalesPad and DataCollection, or even just DataCollection and GP, can work together to automatically move documents throughout the system. So I'm going to pull up SalesPad Desktop. For those that already have SalesPad Desktop, this will look very familiar. If you're not familiar with SalesPad Desktop, again, it's our core product where you can do, it latches to GP for order management, for CRM, for inventory management, those sort of things. It's basically an advanced way to do order entry and many other things inside of Dynamics GP. Since it's the product that we resell, it's what I'm going to be showing as far as having an order flow through my process from picking to confirming it to going into the batch of being shipped. I'm also going to pull up my emulator here so you can see the screen as I go throughout this process. So I actually have a sample picking ticket printed out. So from SalesPad Desktop, we can print this out so it has barcodes on it. So you have your barcodes even on here. I have mine printed out on the form. For you, it might make more sense to actually have those on your items. Whatever you want to do. For the case of this, it's easy enough to put them on the sheet. I also have some sample bins behind me so I can scan those as I go throughout this. And what you're actually going to see is a document currently sitting in the picking queue, so I can easily scan that or just look it up, and data collection is filtering to that. Once I'm all done scanning it, it moves automatically in the background to the shipping queue. A user is maybe going to walk that over and put it there, but inside of Dynamics GP and SalesPad, data collection automatically updates it to move that document. So I'm going to move this over a little bit so you can see it, and in the background I'll actually be using this scanner to do everything. So you can see right now I have this document DC1571 sitting in my picking queue. I'm going to actually go into my warehouse and I'm going to pick this document. So I might have this particular piece of paper, otherwise I might just do a lookup for whatever's in the picking field. I can easily just click on this and it'll look up all documents that are currently sitting in the picking queue, and I can scroll through those and select it. Alternatively, I can just go ahead and scan it. So once I scan this, it's going to go right to the item number field, to which I can go ahead and scan. We can set it up so that you continuously scan. So in this case, I have quantity of 2. So I'm just going to keep scanning until I get my correct quantity, and it automatically moves to the bin field. What I want to show you is if I try to pick, in my setting I have it so I can't pick from the A100 bin. So if I go ahead and try to pick from this and I scan and I submit this, it's actually going to tell me you cannot pick from this bin at this point because I've set it up. So my user couldn't possibly take one of those. They could if they weren't tracking it right, but at least it tells them that you can't pick from here. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and scan another item in, or scan my bin in, and I'm actually going to do the correct one. So I'm going to check the doc bin, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And it says transaction successful. Now I can just move on to my next one. So I'll scan both of those. I'll scan my doc, submit this one, and I'll move to the last one. You can see as I go throughout, it's telling me it's successful. And I'll scan my bin as well. Once I go ahead and click submit, it says it's successful. And what I actually did as part of this process, and something that you can see as I go throughout here, if I missed any of this, it's going to tell me that. So in this particular case, I didn't get one of the HD40s. So I need to go back and do that. If I got that, it would tell me the document was fully picked. So all I have to do is go back into here. I can go into the HD40. I selected it from that screen. And I'm just going to say I'm pulling it from the same spot and submit this. And now it's going to tell me this document has been fully picked. Now in the background, I have this sales monitor open, and you can see it automatically moved that document to the shipping queue. So one of my scanners did something, they probably walked it over, and now someone in shipping, if they had this screen open in the background, they could see that something's in their queue now, so they need to take action with it. In my particular setup, I have a confirmation stage. So, ideally, I pick this, someone moves it to a confirmation step where I'm going to go back and just make sure they pick the right product. So I'm going to click on shipping here, and I'm going to scan my document in. I'm going to go ahead and scan my item number. I'm going to confirm it again, and then I'm going to choose a quantity of 2 because that's how many I have in front of me. I'm going to submit that. Next, I'm going to do my next item, and I'm going to do a quantity of 2 on that as well. So I'm confirming these as I go, and then I have my last item. Again, I have to confirm it, quantity of 2, and I'll submit that, and it's going to tell me that all lines have been confirmed. Again, in my process in the background, it has it set up, so now it's going to move it so it's been shipped. Maybe you use this step to confirm that something's being put on the truck correctly. You can make these go wherever you want. This is just an example in my setup. You don't have to do that confirmation stage. Maybe next you want to go to a packing phase. The point is that by scanning these, it can automatically move it in the background. What I actually want to show too is if I minimize this screen and I just look at SalesPad, you can see this has been shipped now. And if I actually drill into the sales order, we can see a few things. So we can actually see the quantity fulfilled for each line is 2, so I fulfilled those. And if I go into the audit trail, in SalesPad Desktop, it'll actually show you who did it from data collection. It says data collection forwarded document from shipping to shipped. It was user Tom. So I can go back. If a customer has a question, maybe we didn't get one of these, you can go back and say, looks like Tom actually picked this one. Let me go ask Tom to make sure he did it right, make sure he didn't forget to send it along or put it in the right spot next. So you have that full visibility between data collection and SalesPad to see who's doing what at what times so you don't miss anything. I'm going to go back into the mobile device now and do the receiving side of everything. So again, I have the same sort of document here. I have a PO with barcodes on it. Maybe your vendors send you your items with barcodes on them already, or maybe they don't. That's up to you. That's more of a procedural type thing. If you want your vendors to send you barcodes, that's something that they can do. So now I'm going to go into the receiving portion. So I'm going to click on the PO receiving button, and I'm going to go ahead and scan in a PO on this document. So just to show you, I could go ahead and scan the item numbers as well, or I could just select them from the PO, or I could type them in. So I'm going to go ahead and just select them as I go. I'm going to select this HD40, and I'm going to do a quantity of 5. Again, I could scan the bin if I wanted to, or I could choose which bin I want to pull it from. This shows me all of my bins that I could possibly take it from. So I'm going to choose the dock in this case, and I'm going to go ahead and click submit. It'll move on to the next transaction, or the next line. Once this submits, I'll be able to click the same thing and see now that one HD40 or those 5 HD40s have been fully received. Now I can select this HD50 and do the same thing. Once this pulls over, I'll increment to a quantity of 5. I could just scan it 5 times if I wanted to as well. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and I'll just scan the dock in this case. I'll submit this one, and let's just do our last one. So let's do our last one. Again, you can see it's been updated. Both of those have been fully received. It's created a receipt in GP already if I want to just partially receive. Let's say your vendor maybe sent you something and it didn't have all the correct parts in it. Well, I can still receive it and put it in my inventory. And lastly, I'm going to pick the A100. And I'm going to increment that to 5 as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and just, again, scan my dock and submit this. So what you see from the device then is that it fully received this. If I was to go into GP right now and look up this receipt, it would exist. I could post it and it would reflect into inventory. Again, so that's just been a general overview of the picking and also the receiving functions in data collection. If you want a deeper dive demo into data collection, feel free to contact your sales rep or email sales@salespad.net and we'll put you in connection with the right person. So just to recap on what we covered today. So to start off, we went into some key things you have to consider when setting up your warehouse. So things before you ever look into purchasing a warehouse management solution, how should you have things set up, what you need to consider. Also, decisions, what's your budget? What sort of requirements do we have? We also went into some data collection features, some hardware requirements, and then ended with the demo. Again, very high level. Any of these screens that you need to go into additional, we have documentation on our website, again, or you can get in touch with your salesperson. So thanks again for attending the demo today. Please type in any questions you have in the question box and I'll stick around to answer those. Thank you.